And if you were thinking, okay, winter's back, it's not going to be for long. In fact, we're going to see a big warm up over the next couple of days, not just for the Northeast. It's actually going to start in parts of the northern tier in the Midwest today. That heat starts to expand to the east. It expands to the south. And by Thursday, 241 million of us are back above average. Sounds similar, right? We saw a very similar pattern last week where we see the warm up, we break records, we tie records, and then we start to cool down just a little bit as we head towards the weekend. We're going to repeat a very similar pattern this week. St. Cloud, Minnesota, you are on track to break a record today with a high of 63, the record 62. Keep in mind, in St. Cloud, our average highs this time of year are in the 30s. So that's how far above average, and that's how impressive this warm-up is going to be once again. We've seen several of these so far in just the past couple of weeks. 50s, 60s, 70s, Dodge City, Kansas making it all the way to 75 this afternoon. 15 to 25 degrees above average, but we'll watch as that heat starts to expand, and we'll see the area of high pressure expand to the east. It expands to the south, and that'll bring more people into those above average temperatures. Tomorrow, we expand the 70s down to areas like Nashville, Atlanta, Jackson, Mississippi, making it all the way to 75. Dallas, close to the 80-degree mark. We will see some 80s in Texas by Tuesday, and that dome of high pressure now starts to settle by the later half of the week over the southeast, over the mid-Atlantic, and that is what's going to be responsible for our big-time warm-up, 5 to 15 degrees above average. So yes, it's a little cold snap right now, especially for the Northeast. The Southeast even had a little bit of a cold snap this weekend, but it's not going to last for very long. And Jordan, it's been really hard to get the cold air to stay in a lot of these places, not just so far this spring, but also this winter as well.
Yeah, it's been very up and down and unfortunate
as well. And if you can see the double rainbow, it's always spectacular. You might have trouble in parts of the Northeast today, travel-wise, because of all of the wind. Yes, we're done for the most part with the snow. You might have a few lingering snowflakes, but it's going to be the wind that really causes a lot of problems, especially on the 95 corridor at some of our major airports. And it's not just, with taking off or landing. You might experience some major turbulence going into many of these airports. Now, no reports so far, but we're still really early in the morning. Not a lot of flights out there along Washington, D.C., New York, Boston, Portland. That's where the turbulence is going to be pretty intense as we head throughout the day, as we head into the afternoon. Eventually, as this low pressure system continues to lift away and we're not dealing with the wind anymore, then the turbulence should ease up just a little bit. But a lot of flights coming in and out of those areas, even if you're just connecting somewhere else. So keep that in mind for your flights today. Travel forecast wise, the snow is going to eventually taper off, but the wind is not. So not only for travel as far as airplanes, but also on many of our major interstates, high profile vehicles, it's going to be a rough ride today. And power outages are already extensive across the Northeast just because of all of the wind that we have out there. When we get to Tuesday into Wednesday, that's when we start to pick up our chance for severe weather. Kansas City all the way down to Tulsa, parts of the Turner Turnpike, all the way in, say, I-64, I-44. You could be seeing some rough weather, especially as we get into the afternoon and the early morning hours. Wednesday morning, we could see overnight severe weather with damaging winds and hail being the primary concern, but that's not our only threat for severe weather. As we head into this week, we have another threat on Thursday, especially in Texas. So, Jordan, we're getting into the spring season, but when it comes to March in Denver, it's actually one of the snowier months that we see in Denver. And if you're not seeing the snow this weekend, then you saw the really cold temperatures, which we still have this morning, and the wind. That's really been the biggest problem. But this is a look at the past 24 hours snowfall amount-wise. We've seen quite a bit off the Great Lakes, areas like Buffalo, just south of Buffalo and some of the south towns, the Lake Erie snowbelt, and then up towards our higher elevations. That's really where we've seen the most snowfall, as expected when you have a system like this. Bartlett, New Hampshire, 14 inches of snow, just over 14 inches of snow. Now, there are some ski resorts in Maine and New Hampshire and Vermont that have actually had to close early because they haven't seen enough snow up to this point. But at a place like Sugarbush, yesterday, they actually had a powder day. I haven't seen too many of those, but the power was out, so they couldn't run the lifts. So hopefully they have those back up and running today so that people can enjoy the snow. Some of it is still falling today. It's not going to linger for too long, but this will be lifting out of here as we go throughout the day, as this low pressure system continues to go off to the east and to the northeast. Areas like Burlington, you could pick up a little bit more snow, but Boston, Hartford, Albany, Portland, a lot of these places, it is all about the wind, and the wind causing problems when it comes to power outages. It's been strong. We've seen some wind gusts on the order of 40, 50 miles per hour. Definitely a little bit stronger when you get to the coast, of course. Virginia, you're leading the number as far as power outages right now, and we have a wind advisory from some of our higher elevations of West Virginia all the way up through portions of Maine, and that's going to continue for a majority of today. It's doing a number on our temperatures and our wind chills this morning. You can look at the wind gusts that we're expecting throughout the rest of the morning. Boston gusting to 40 to 50, New York City, Philly, Dover, Ocean City, all in that 40 to 50 mile per hour range. And that's going to really cause some problems, not only with trying to drive on the roadways, but also catching a lot of flights. It could be difficult for takeoff and landing, and turbulence is going to be pretty high in this corridor pretty much all throughout the day. Eventually, we start to see the winds taper off by tomorrow morning, and that will also help with our wind chills, too. It won't feel nearly as cold tomorrow morning, but right now our temperatures are in the 30s. But when you factor in the wind, Boston feels like 22, Syracuse 19, which isn't too unusual, Jordan, for this time of year. But the fact that we've been so warm as of late, it feels a little bit more brutal.
Yeah, and that's what it's like, deceiving, because you think, oh man, I'm going to hit the slopes. The snow's so good. But remember, we haven't had so much of it all season.
It's been
so
a lot of
rocks are right there.
Mud in between, too. We're getting into mud season as well. I know, right?
Terrible. Speaking of an area where we haven't seen much.
Welcome back into this Monday morning edition of America's Morning Headquarters. And if you are trying to travel this Monday, maybe catching a flight at one of our airports in the Northeast New England, you likely will have trouble today. Not just this morning, but throughout the day, as the winds really are the biggest problem. We already have some delays, a ground delay of just over an hour at LaGuardia, and I would anticipate that many of our busy airports, Boston, Newark, likely seeing some delays as well, all thanks to the wind. Philly, Washington, D.C., Portland, Burlington with some snow and some wind. Syracuse, same deal for you. Not a lot of turbulence reports at the moment. We do have some that are over, say, Connecticut up towards the Massachusetts area, but as the morning goes on and we get more planes up in the sky that have the ability to determine if there's turbulence or not, I imagine we're going to see more reports. The zone for turbulence today is really going to be over this very busy corridor. So even if New York City or Washington, D.C. or Boston is not your final destination, you have to connect through there, you're likely going to experience some turbulence, takeoff and landing, and as you're getting up to that flight level. The snow tapers off today, but the gusty winds remain, so we could see some more power outages, and not just difficult for air travel, but also road travel. Jordan?
All right, well, guess what?
The door right now in the Midwest, taking a look at Milwaukee as well. Come in a couple of days. So hold on. If you're not a fan of winter, you're kind of just done with it at this point. We have a big springtime warm up that's starting in the northern tier. It's starting in the Midwest today, and it'll slowly expand to not only the north and the northeast, the mid-Atlantic and the southeast by the second half of the week. And if you're like, okay, this pattern seems familiar. Yeah, we've seen it for the past couple of weeks, where we see a big time warm up and then we go right back down to the cooler weather. St. Cloud, Minnesota, you will likely break a record today, 63 degrees. Your average high this time of year is in the 30s. La Crosse making it near 70 this afternoon. Your average high is in the 40s. So wherever you look, wherever point you pick out, we are well above average. Oklahoma City, 71, Dodge City, 75. But it's this zone from Marquette to the Twin Cities, Des Moines, all the way up to Bemidji, where we are 15 to 25 degrees above average. And that's not unusual for what we've been seeing so far this winter, is serious warmth and lack of snowfall in this part of the country. Now, tomorrow, we expand that number of 70s to parts of the mid-Atlantic, Philadelphia, 65 after the cooler temperatures we have this morning. And there'll be spots in Texas that easily make it into the 80s. So that dome of high pressure that's allowing for our warm up in the Midwest, in the northern tier, that starts to spread east, and that allows for the warm up to start to happen in parts of the south. Saw a quick cold snap this weekend. It was pretty chilly yesterday morning in cities like Greenville, South Carolina, Nashville, Atlanta, Birmingham. That's a thing of the past very quickly. So by Wednesday, more of us are in those above average temperatures, and that includes the Northeast. So we mentioned, hold on. If you're not a fan of the cooler weather, especially the wind chills we have this morning that are making things feel kind of blustery and raw outside, things will change. Now, as mentioned, we've been in this pattern for a couple of weeks now where we see a big warm up and then we start to cool back down. By the end of the week in Minneapolis and the Twin Cities, we're starting to see that cool down. But, Jordan, I don't even know if you can call it a cool down because we're not even making it back down to average.
10 degrees above?
Yeah, 10 degrees above.
No.
I mean, it's a cool down, but it's
cooler.
Still warmer than what nature. Thank you, Jordan. Well, overseas for your Monday morning front lines. Helicopter. And if you're traveling today, you have to be pretty dedicated because you might need a lot of patience, especially in the Northeast, because the wind is causing all sorts of problems. You saw the wind with the crashing waves in Massachusetts, but we're going to see wind causing some big problems at many of our airports today, including LaGuardia, which already has a ground delay this morning. Just over an hour for that ground delay, and you can see the winds. We're expecting wind gusts 35 to 40 miles per hour, and that's going to have big impacts not only at LaGuardia. I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see some delays at JFK as well as Philly, over to Boston, Burlington with snow and winds, Syracuse with snow and wind, but we're seeing improvements in places like Buffalo where the snow is moving out and the wind is starting to taper off just a little bit. Not surprising that we're already seeing some reports of turbulence, especially in those purple icons that you see. We're kind of getting past the moderate turbulence and more into the edging into the severe turbulence, and that's where we have the most wind and expecting the most problems with air travel today. You can see the turbulence as we get into the afternoon. As we get into the evening hours, it starts to ease up a little bit, but this is a major corridor for travel, and so either takeoff, landing, or even if your plane is coming from one of these airports, you can expect some delays. The snow tapers off today, but the wind continues, so more power outages are likely, and travel could be difficult on the roadways, especially for high-profile vehicles. Jordan, though, this is what's going on in the Northeast. Let's head to the Intermountain West, where we're expecting some big snow.
All right, let's talk.
Brief little taste of winter. It hasn't been this way for a long time. In fact, it's just been the last, I don't know, about 24 to 36 hours or so, but we saw some decent snow in places, especially lake effect snow, just Buffalo South towns down through the Lake Erie snow belt. We saw some great snow at our higher elevations in Vermont, as well as New Hampshire and some of our higher elevations in Maine, which, by the way, there were some ski resorts, Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, that had to close early. They just said this season has been awful for us. It doesn't make sense for us to stay open. Now, there are still some that are open, and they saw some great snow. In fact, Bartlett, New Hampshire, 14 inches of snow, just over 14 inches. Rochester saw 14 inches of snow, so we're talking over a foot. And we still have a little bit of snow falling this morning. It's not a lot. This is kind of the last breath of this low pressure system as it continues to move off to the east into the northeast. Burlington, you could see some more snow, as well as portions of Maine, northernmost points of New England, which really have been the big snowfall winners of this season so far. We're not quite done yet. We can still see some snows well into springtime, so we don't want to say it's over yet, but places like Portland, Boston, New York City, hasn't been a lot of snow so far this year. Now, the big deal for a lot of us this morning is the wind. The wind is pretty brutal out there. It's causing some power outages. It's doing a number on our wind chills. Right now, we have about 43,000 customers without power. And just a couple of minutes ago, I'd sort of say it's about 25 minutes ago, when Steph was showing these numbers, it was just at 30,000. So we're climbing very quickly with some of the numbers as far as who is out of power this morning. The wind will continue as we head throughout the day. Wind advisories from some of our higher elevations of West Virginia straight up the 95 corridor all the way into Maine. Here are some of the wind gusts that we're dealing with this morning. 40 to 50 mile per hour wind gusts for you. Boston, New York, Scranton, Philly, Dover. That's a pretty big area of real estate that we're dealing with, these very strong winds. That will cause problems with travel, just trying to drive this morning, just trying to get out of your car and walk to and from where you need to go. And eventually by this evening, we'll start to see these winds slowly wind down, and by tomorrow morning, they shouldn't be as much of an issue as they are today. But we know, Jordan, it's cold, yes, in the Northeast, but take a place like Minnesota.
Minnesota.
I mean,
where is the cold?
Where's the snow?
It's the non-winter winter.
Yeah.
Or the winter that wasn't, I guess, is what the...
Welcome back on this Monday to America's Morning Headquarters. If you are traveling to or from the Northeast today, or maybe your flight is just originating from those areas, have a lot of patience when you get to the airport, because we're already seeing some delays, all thanks to the wind. In fact, as we go to LaGuardia, we already have a ground delay that's just over an hour. You can see the wind gusts, the big culprit, where we're gusting right now 30 to 40 miles per hour. And that's the same deal up and down the 95 corridor for many of our major airports. So we're talking Philly, Newark, JFK, Boston, Portland, all could be seeing delays due to the wind as the day goes on. Already some reports of turbulence, no surprise, As we get more flights up in the sky, you're going to get more reports of turbulence that get sent down. And you can see some spots, those purple airplanes, that's where it's reporting somewhere between moderate to almost severe turbulence. Not great when you start off the morning that way, right? And it might be one of those days that when you get on the airplane, some of the flight attendants are giving you snacks and water as you get on the plane because they're not able to do that in-flight service because it's just too bumpy. As we go throughout the day, the turbulence starts to die down as the wind starts to taper off. So that's at least good news. In the meantime, we're going to be seeing wind throughout the day, and that's going to cause difficult travel out on the roadways, especially for high-profile vehicles, and also a number of power outages already this morning, impacting a lot of people across the Mid-Atlantic and the Northeast. But Jordan, speaking of travel, in 27 days, there's going to be a lot of people traveling for the total solar eclipse.
Yeah, unless you're one of the lucky few.
At the top of the hour on America's Morning Headquarters, a busy weather. You're like, okay, this weather is really crummy today. I'm not a fan of this. It's too cold. It's too windy. I've got some great news for you because we're going to see a big time warm up by the middle part of the week, the end of the week, as we watch the warmth build into the northern tier, the Midwest today. It expands to the south and to the east tomorrow, and by Thursday, 241 million of us back to above average temperatures. Does this pattern sound familiar? We've seen it now for a couple of weeks where we see a big warm up. We get some severe weather in parts of the south, the southern plains to the southeast, and then we see a cool down and some rain as we head towards the weekend. But in the meantime, we're going to be breaking or tying records, no question. Twin Cities over to St. Cloud, La Crosse, where our usual high, our average high this time of year is in the 40s. Instead, we're near 70 this afternoon. Lots of 60s and 70s on the map, including 75 for you in Dodge City. But things get even warmer as we head into tomorrow. So here's a look at the expansion of the warm weather for tomorrow. Now in parts of Oklahoma as well as Texas, where very likely we will see some 80 degrees in Texas, not just in Lubbock. Dallas, you're getting very close in some of the surrounding areas. And now we're watching the 70s expand into Atlanta as well as Raleigh, Nashville, Chicago, really even close to 70 degrees, which is just wild when you think about March in Chicago. We can see all types of weather, and this week it is spring. Now our dome of high pressure towards the later half of the week is centered over the Mid-Atlantic and the southeast. It's still going to be warm in places like Chicago, but now we're seeing the warm up expand to the Mid-Atlantic. We're seeing the warm up expand into the northeast, which Buffalo, you just had lake effect snow this weekend, and by the later half of the week, we're talking 60s. Upper 50s, 60s for your highs. Now we will see a cool down towards the later part of the week for the Twin Cities, but in the meantime, 60s both today, tomorrow, Wednesday, Thursday, we see a cool down. Yes, our high will be near 50, but that's still well above average for this time of year. New York City, which is very cold this morning. A lot of our wind chills are in the 20s in the Big Apple this morning, but by Thursday, we are into the 70s. And I'm thinking, Jordan, Central Park, 70s, walking around. It sounds really nice.
It does sound nice.
In the Texas Panhandle. Well, a quick look now at your Monday morning front lines. Look at this. Nobody was hurt. And same deal for the tornado that happened very early in Alabama on Saturday morning. That was at 2 a.m.
Yeah.
And no injuries, so that was great news.
Great news, because a lot of times.
Let's talk travel in the Northeast, because we're starting to see the problems slowly increase. And we were anticipating this morning. Doesn't make it any easier for your travel plans. But now we have problems at both LaGuardia and Newark, which, by the way, at Newark, we have a ground stop because of the wind. Look at these wind gusts, 50 to 60 miles per hour. The wind holding steady at 43, no question. That's why they're having so many problems this morning. Now we will see the wind be a problem throughout the day, so hopefully they can lift that ground stop if the wind gets a little bit lighter, and they likely will. But in the meantime, we're likely going to see airport delays at not only LaGuardia, which we already have a ground delay there, but also JFK, Boston, maybe even BWI and some of our Washington, D.C. airports, and then up towards Portland. And then, by the way, Burlington and Syracuse, not only do we have the wind problems, we also have snow that's still falling. We have all these turbulence reports. So look at this. This is what we were talking about. We've been talking about all morning long, where this is going to be a very difficult corridor for travel today. That's where we have some of the strongest wind speeds, and turbulence is going to be an issue as we go throughout the day. Not until we get later to this evening and through the overnight hours does the wind finally start to back off. So when you're traveling today, lots of patience is going to be needed, even if you're not flying through one of these major cities. There's a lot of flights that originate from these cities, and you could see delays even if you're not even traveling anywhere close to here. Now, road-wise, travel is going to be difficult with high-profile vehicles where we still have snow. Visibility could be an issue. And when we have the wind gusts to 45, which we easily have in a lot of areas today, not only is it difficult for high-profile vehicles, but you could have some small objects that are blown around too, impacting your travel as well. Now, Jordan, it does feel like winter in the Northeast this morning, but it's nothing compared to what Denver is in store for the next couple of days.
And it's been such an
Let's talk Winter Storm Preston, because it's causing some problems in the Northeast, and you would think, okay, is it from the snow? No, not really. It's from the wind this morning. This is the snow that we've seen over the past 24 hours. You can see pockets of heavier snow, lake effect snow. Then we get up towards the higher elevations. You can really pick out the higher peaks. That's where we saw some of the highest snowfall amounts. And some of the big snowfall winners, Bartlett, New Hampshire, 14.3 inches of snow. There's a couple spots that saw over a foot of snow just from this one system. And there it is right now, our low pressure system that's moving off to the east, but you can see behind this the winds are wicked this morning in many parts of the Northeast and New England, and even down towards the mid-Atlantic. You see these white lines. These are lines of equal pressure, and when they're stacked together like that, that is a sign that we're seeing a lot of wind. And certainly we are. A number of power outages this morning where we still have snow. We've got blowing and drifting snow impacting the visibility, and the snow will taper off as we go throughout the day, but the winds will remain pretty strong, at least until we get to the overnight hours. By overnight, the only area that's still seeing snow is northernmost parts of New England, far in northern Maine. Here's a look at the power outages. They've kind of been fluctuating this morning. Now we're back up to around 40,000 customers without power, with the state of Virginia seeing the most power outages. We have wind advisories stretching from the higher elevations of West Virginia clear up into Maine. You have a lot of states that are completely covered by wind advisories this morning, and here's why. Some of these wind gusts, 40, 50 miles per hour. That's why there is a ground stop right now at Newark. There's a ground delay in LaGuardia. Travel issues are going to be top of mind for a lot of us today, just not by traveling by air, but also traveling by road, or even if you're just trying to walk around New York City today, it's going to be difficult, especially with the wind funneling through some of those buildings, making it feel so much stronger. By tomorrow morning, big sigh of relief. We're done with the wind. It won't be nearly as cold because we're not dealing with the wind chills tomorrow morning as well. But Jordan, yes, winter, at least for a day or two. In the Northeast.
That's been the case all winter, it seems like.
It seems like we've really been struggling to even get winter for a day or two in parts of the northern tier.
Yeah, it's like, oh, there it is. Oh, there it goes. Oh, there it is. Oh, there it goes. So we're calling it the winter.
Welcome back into this Monday morning of America's Morning Headquarters, and it feels like a Monday, right? Especially if you're trying to travel in the Northeast, because it's becoming a headache very quickly. We have delays at LaGuardia and Newark, all thanks to the wind that's extremely strong this morning. There's a ground delay of about an hour and 30 minutes at Newark because of the wind gusting 50 to 60 miles per hour. Imagine that, trying to land a plane in that. It also depends on which direction the wind is coming from and, you know, which way the runway is going. But we also have a ground delay at LaGuardia, over an hour, and it's been that way for the last hour and a half or so. A lot of patience will be needed. We could also see some delays: Boston, Philly, JFK, Portland, BWI, our DC airports, Syracuse, Burlington, all thanks to the system that's swirling its way out of the Northeast today, but the wind remains, and the wind remains throughout the day. A lot of turbulence reports over the 95 corridor right now. That's where we have some of the strongest wind speeds, and they'll continue to be there for at least the next couple of hours. By later this afternoon, later this evening, some of those winds will start to move offshore, and that should help improve things just a little bit travel-wise. But it's likely going to be one of those days when you're getting on the airplane that they give you snacks and water before you even sit down, because it's just too dangerous for the flight attendants to walk around. It's also going to be difficult travel out on the roadways, and power outages, those continue to climb too. Steph?
It seems like we've been.
Let's head to our dog walking forecast and see where all the good boys and girls are going to be going for a walk today on the weekend. Well, let's get you out the door in the Midwest. Milwaukee and Bloomington, good morning.